Okay, so we're now finally on our third session for this unit, which is web-based development. So our aim for this session today, we have to be able to create a web-based solution to a business problem. Moving to the next slide. Yeah, so we've already covered some marketing techniques last week, and in the session before we also mentioned about type of web application and how they work between the front end and the back end and how they're connected. So in today's session, we will cover again what we spoke about during our first session. So we will look into understanding the full stack and the technologies which are used to make this work. So as you can see from our definition, web development refers to building website and deploying on the web. Web development requires the use of script language, both at the server and as well as the client end. So we mentioned in our first tutorial that in order for us to make a responsive web page, we will now use HTML and CSS, and to control the behavior of our website, we will now integrate the use of JavaScript, which is an actual programming language, while HTML and CSS are just markup language. So by markup language means they just work with tags, while JavaScript can now receive commands. You can now work with variables, constant, and make so many things. So we all familiar to web system development life cycle, where we'll now have our initial phase of planning the website. Then we'll proceed into designing it, having some sketch of a wireframe and how this has to be done. Then once we have gathered all the information, we'll now move into the coding side, where we'll now implement all the coding. And then we have to test it in order to validate each type of functionality. And conclusively, we will now deploy to the market. So we'll now deploy it through FTP protocol, file transfer protocol. We can now advertise with SEO marketing in order to attract and promote our website. So when it comes to the designing, we need to have a really good web interface. So this will now require to have a really good user interface, which is very friendly, and it can now attract the attention of our customers and stakeholders. And also we have to be able to maintain this design through user experience, where we now gather feedback from our stakeholders, and we'll now be able to share this with our developers in order for them to improve the quality of our product. Also, we'll look into functionality requirements gathering, user and task analysis, and then we have a few more questions which we will answer. So it is really important to have information architecture. So what do we mean by this? We're just going to develop, it's just the development of the process and information flow of the system. So our architecture now shows us how our web application will now work through each step. And this will be done through the use also of prototyping, where, as mentioned, we can create a wireframe, which there are plenty of software which allows us to do this. Some of them could be Adobe, or we can use Figma and many other online platforms that will allow us to create a really nice prototype. Then also we need to take consideration of usability inspection, where we are going to let an evaluator inspect the user interface. Also, when it comes to web page development, we need to be able to test and able also to send back information to our developers. So something we did not look into properly was on the image where it shows full stack development, where on the client side, we now have, which is our front end, we now have all these frameworks which will allow us to create this really responsive front page. And also when it comes to server side, we will now have ASP, PHP, .NET, Ruby, and Java. So these are pretty much our backend. And this is very important because when we receive a request from the front end, our backend will be the one who will connect our front end to our database in order for us to have a response. Then there are loads of type of databases depending on SQL or non-SQL databases. So we have, when I mean SQL, we're talking about structured query language database or non-structured query database, which they completely work in a different way. Also, we need to look into accessibility issues. So what is a web accessibility? This will now refer to the inclusive practice of removing barriers that prevent interaction with or access our website. This could be stuff like firewalls or any type of VPN and proxy which makes our accessibility restricted. So some of the issues could be visible focus, alternative text for images, or even Google Capture. Okay, so now we can have a look at W3 School, which it is a really good website for students and whoever wants to learn web development. So there are loads of concept with tutorials, and just by going through this, you'll now be able to create your front end, and you'll now be able also to create backend because we have databases with SQL, and then we have our backend side where we can learn PHP, Java, and different other languages, ASP, .NET, and so on. Yeah. So coming back to our presentation. So we have usability issue. By usability means that our application is now user-friendly, and with this will now impact really a lot the organization because our users, our stakeholders will now decide to move on and use other providers who have a better usability. and they make the application very simple to understand and very easy to use. Also, there are SEO strategies, which we mentioned in our last tutorial, where we looked into marketing, the marketing side of promoting our business. So here there are some strategies which we can cover again. Step one, we can now define our target audience and the interest. So we always need to know our customer, our stakeholders, and what are their priorities and what do they need. Also, we can categorize keyword research, whereby keyword categorized, there are keywords which will be used to redirect the users to the site. So these keywords are really important to increase our Google ranking, and they are really good for the SEO. Also, it is important to finding gaps and opportunities where these areas where there is content on the site for a term, but the referral volume is very low. Also, it's important to define the competitors, see who the competition and how are they improving the service, and also how can we cope with the market. Here are some good practice of SEO techniques, and these are very important in order for us to improve and optimize our web application. Okay, now so we're going to look into the server-side script, the server-side development, which is a technique used in web development, and it now involves employing a script on a web server, which will now produce a response customized for each user, so for our client. So there are various type of languages which we can use to work with our backend. So depending on which stack you decide to use, you will now have the software required for it. So depending if you prefer Microsoft and you decide to go with .NET, you now have your full stack with the Microsoft environment, and you now have your database with Microsoft SQL Server, while other people will choose another stack like MERN, which is MongoDB, Express.js, React, and Node.js. This is a really good full development stack, and it is being used by most of the top companies in the world, and it gives you a really usability when it comes to creating application. So server-side script, it is distinguished from the client script, and we're embedded with script such as JavaScript and run on the client with a browser, but both techniques are often used together. But when it comes to the backend, will now be defined with three parts. So we have the server, our database, and our API, and the backend application. So by having the combination of these frameworks, we can now have a full backend, and we can now manage it as much as we want. So popular server-side languages are PHP, which as of now is the most popular server-side language on the web. And PHP, it is designed to pull and edit information from our database. So in most common bundle with databases written in SQL language. Also, we have Python with a few line of code. The Python programming language is fast and it is making it easier for getting things to market quickly. So Python, it doesn't work with a compiler, but it works with an interpreter, and it makes easy for the machine and the user to communicate. Also, we have Ruby and C#, which are really good server-side website languages, and they will now depend on which framework or full stack we decide to use. Also, we have C++, which is really good, but it's not being used as the other one that we mentioned. And then we have Java also, which is more used for industrial purposes. Also, here we have explanation of WAMP server, which is a Windows Web development environment, and it allows us to create web application with Apache 2, PHP, and SQL as a full stack. And here there is some explanation of how we set up our environment, our PHP environment. So this is a walkthrough step by step, which shows us how to install our backend and work with PHP. So here, example of how we work with our opening tag to our closing tag, and it shows us a simple input. So we have an HTML script, which will say my first PHP page, and we want this to print out hello world. So PHP is case sensitive, like most of the programming languages out there. And in the example below, all three echo statements below are legal. Here we have more in-depth explanation of how PHP works. So we use variables the same way we use variables in other programming languages, and this will contain temporary data type, which can now be switched or converted when we enter a new value. Also, we have SQL, or structured query language, depending on how you want to call it. And it is pretty much our database. And we have already covered database and how to create our database and extract and manipulate information from our database. So we've covered this in other unit. Also, it is important to integrate in multimedia to our web interface, where we're just going to add content and abundance of online content. So we'll now be including images, video, and audio, and slides, which will make it user-friendly and allow us to engage with our users. Here we have some explanation of how we can improve this integration of multimedia by using images, videos, and text. So here's the explanation of how you use the tag to insert a video, or how the tag should look like when you try to insert images and audio. So I will leave these slides for you to have a look and familiarize on how this has to be done. So this was everything for today. Is there any question for me?
There's a question.
No question? Okay, so if you have no question, then I'm going to end the session now. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, bye.